Hello ladies and gentlemen, semi-finals time at the Chessable Masters. We had an absolute ripper of a pairing, Magnus Carlsen against Liren and Anish Giri against Pragnananda. And I think that this was a super entertaining round. Hopefully by now I'm not going to spoil anything. As far as I'm concerned, definitely two upsets. Pragnananda, although he's in red hot form, still surprised me by defeating Anish Giri, and Liren also slightly surprised me by beating Carlsen, although I have to add that I think that in the top 10 right now in one of the hottest form definitely belongs to Liren. He plays some insanely good chess and I'm super excited to see how he's going to perform in the candidates. A quick story about Pragnananda, by the way. He was playing his games and finished, I think, at 2:45 a.m. at his time. And at 11 o'clock he needed to attend a school exam. So kid is actually performing pretty alright for considering how well he's playing chess, and at the same time he even needs to worry about school exams. Imagine what happens when he doesn't need to go to school anymore. But today we are going to have a look at Liren's masterpiece against Magnus Carlsen, which kicked off with a semi-Slav sort of setup, where instead of playing e6, Magnus opted for bishop g4, which more often than not ends up in this bishop being traded off for a knight. And generally speaking, the elite quite enjoys to go into these setups where, if at least nominally, but white does have an advantage in the shape of the two bishops. Now Carlsen followed a particularly interesting strategy because he tried to keep the position very, very close so that these two bishops, or rather closed, so that these two bishops can't really excel. Very logical, awesome moves by both parties. For the time being, it doesn't quite seem apparent what Liren is playing for. Magnus's setup is extremely compact and by the book, more or less. But once again, once it reaches its maximum potential by pulling the bishop back to d6, you would wonder, okay, but what now? And there is not necessarily an obvious answer to this question, because the only sensible break appears to be e5. But it does have a lot of downsides, especially after CD takes and the whole position blows open. And all of a sudden the two bishops do begin to perform rather well. So black has to be very measured, and he must calculate very accurately in terms of how and when to break in the center. Now Liren surprisingly went like, you know what, I'm gonna shut down the queen side and then the center. And this at first sight appears to be a strategical error, no less, because now he's the one sealing the deal, which technically on paper favors the knights. However, one thing that we need to note here that makes this whole strategic decision super exciting and fun to observe is that more or less on both wings, queen side and king side, it is white who has got the chance to make something happen. I can go for b4, a4, b5, which by the way is more or less the #1 plan for white. But if I really want to, I could also go g4, let's say bishop, maybe put back it to d2, king to the side, rook g1, rook f1, and start some attack on the king side. And the center, for all intents and purposes, is closed. And so I actually quite like this paradoxical decision by Liren, which also means, by the way, that now black does not have anything to play for at all. Maybe in a very, very crazy world, some king h8, rook g8, g5 breaks may or may not work, but I don't believe in that. And so Magnus here played bishop a5. And again, I didn't quite do my homework, but I enjoy sometimes not doing it, not because I'm lazy, but because I feel like I have got my own thoughts, my own ideas brought to this video rather than parroting what top GM said. But everyone said that Carlsen blundered this pawn. I don't even know, by the way, what's going to be put in the thumbnail, so I might contradict the thumbnail. I don't think he blundered it. I do think that this was an intentional choice. I've got two reasons why I believe that that is the case. A, this is way below par for Carlsen to blunder, right? Like, everyone blunders, everyone sucks in tricks, it all happens. This is typically something that a world champion would not blunder, that they hang a bishop, which is very clearly in the x-ray of the e1 bishop, or rather in the discovered attack potential. The knight can go to d5, threatening checks. Not gonna happen. A player of Magnus Carlsen's stature does not blunder stuff like this. I would be willing to bet on this. I think his idea was exactly what I'm telling you, and that is that black is utterly planless. And he wanted to break that trend. And actually, if you think about it, although, again, nominally, this is a blunder of a pawn. But the reality is that the extra pawn is the one on e3, which is neither here nor there. In fact, it's a target. Secondly, as a result of him not having his own e-pawn, he has access to the e4 square to blockade. So I think what happened here was that Magnus very well saw that knight takes d5 was coming, but he misevaluated this position, which, by the way, I would have misevaluated too, because if someone asked me evaluate this position, I would say white is slightly better, maybe white is better, but you know, nothing to write home about. There is a lot of hard work to do here for white to convert this to a win. But it turns out that that hard work is quite doable. And black is still rather passive, despite the fact that, you know, they can chuck a knight on e4. It's quite curious how the game developed, because here Ding actually performed a remarkable king walk. Petrosian-like king walk, if you like. So Magnus beautifully reroutes the pieces. He didn't chuck the knight onto e4, but that can come anytime, no worries. He's jumping around with his knights. Actually, knight with d8 was quite prudent, because there was a chance of a massive pile-up on this b-pawn. In fact, it's gonna happen, as we shall see. So now he jumps into e4, secures e4, and as these things go on, the evaluation of the engine just keeps on going up, up, up. And here, according to the Mighty Machine, which, by the way, I tend to agree with, it turns out that there was absolutely no need to walk across here. A simple b4, a4, and playing for b5 would have done the damage. And I don't really know, to be honest, why Ding Liren did not choose to do that. He actually did this whilst transitioning with the king to the queen side. And even when he did this, I thought that the idea was that he was going to strike in the king side very soon after. For example, he g4 is recommended by the engine, and I quite like it. But he actually hung around the queen side a fair bit, played a3 even, which the reason why I'm highlighting that is because it takes away the square from the rook, although most likely it's irrelevant, because if you want to break on the queen side, it's going to be a4, b4, roll up the pawns and go. But definitely here, there was a bit of a positional, you know, mucking around. And now he started rerouting his pieces. So now the bishop is en route to h4. And potentially the heavies could even come back and play for g4. g5 was played. And this is where essentially the game began. Like, this is when the action is on. But unfortunately for black, it now comes with the position getting ripped open, which is the playground of the bishops. Bishop d1, that was actually a mistake according to the engine, but I will get to that in a second. And after g4, take, queen f1, if you can believe the mighty engine, pawn g3 would have shut down this bishop for a very long time to come. And it's quite difficult to see how white can now crack this position open. I would still try to stir back to the queen side with b4, a4, but most definitely this would have been the most tenacious defense, after which Ding Liren still would have had his work carved out for him. Instead, however, h5 was played, and now after queen h1, g3 was still good to go. Magnus misses that, and now after bishop h4, it is all over Red Rover, and it's very, very interesting to see actually why. The whole idea is that white now can put both bishops on a diagonal where they attack a knight. And although technically I shouldn't be very keen about trading knights, but in order to get in order to penetrate, I will have to get rid of with at least one of them. And the idea is that I put a bishop on c2, I take f6, the knight takes back, and then the queen sneaks in via h4 and g5, finally finding targets in the black position. And that's more or less what happened. Watch. Knight drop back to g8 to avoid the trade and to avoid the queen being able to come to h4. Bishop c2, knight d2, and that was the biggest mistake that Carlsen made, which is a tactical blunder actually, because this move gives up the g5 square, and now the bishop can sneak in, opening up the h file to the queen and not caring the slightest about the exchange, which got taken. Ding Liren took back, and now queen h5 is unstoppable. And finally, after like 20 odd moves of maneuvering, we are going to experience something that was quite unimaginable 20 moves ago, and that is the complete explosion in the middle. Look, take, rook h8, check, and e4. Who would have thought in this position, when actually Magnus gave up the bishop, in my opinion intentionally, that white is going to win this game by playing e4. That just sounds crazy, but this is the nature of these really long-lasting positional battles, that the battlegrounds tend to shift, queen side, king side, back to center, queen side, and eventually, as we went through the game, the attention shifted to the king side quite a bit, and so black started abandoning the e4 square, wants to avoid the bishop penetration, or rather the queen, and wants to attack the rook. And all of a sudden, a couple of moves later, we find ourselves without sufficient guard on e4, and Ding just goes in for the kill like the champ he is. And the rest is just an absolute mop-up job. Takes, bishop takes, and now he even wants to break with d5 to add insult to injury. Watch, d5. And now the king is just extremely awkwardly dancing in the middle of the board, surrounded by attackers and no meaningful defenders. King d8, queen g5, very nice spin, rook f8, and now this is just complete paralysis. Black is just utterly dead lost. Queen c7 trying to make way for the king. Note that king here loses, in fact allows mate very quickly after the discovered check on c6, hence the move queen c7. Magnus tries to run to the corner like so, but unfortunately there is too much material falling along the way, and now rook takes b7 is going to follow. Rook f4 was played, and any move here literally wins, even rook takes c7, but he went queen c7 to mop up the job on the 7th rank. A very impressive victory by the Chinese Super GM, who actually showed no mercy whatsoever in this game to Magnus. Once again, I would like to stick to my guns. I think bishop a5 was a misevaluation, not a blunder. Nonetheless, a very impressive game, and in fact a very impressive series by Ding Liren, who is going to face Praggnanandhaa in the finals. A short I guess prediction about said finals. I am definitely rooting for the youngster, but I do think that Ding Liren's amazing form and knowledge of chess is going to reign supreme. We will see. I'm super excited. I will be back with a recap with the finals as well, so I will see you there. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, to sub, to comment, and yeah, let's see what happens tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.